Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now, what a year it has been for Toro Rosso, a record-breaking year you could say, well for them anyway. They've scored 85 points, picked up 2 podiums and finished 6th in the Constructors' Championship. 2019 comfortably represents their best year in Formula 1 to date. Alright, without taking anything away from them, their points tally is inflated thanks to those shock podiums in Germany and Brazil. And if you were, for whatever reason, to adjust that tally because of that, then they would absolutely fall down the order. But quite frankly, who really cares about that? It was just really nice to enjoy a couple of great results for an underdog team, and we don't get to see that very often in F1 these days. But pushing those races aside, they had a very consistent season and only actually failed to score at 6 races all year, so they deserve huge credit for that. And the thing is, they were one of the big surprises for me in 2019. I'll be honest, not the biggest, but one of. I fully expected that they would be used as a bit of a testbed for Red Bull and Honda, as they were last season, of course, 2018. You know, penalties every other weekend to help develop that Honda power unit, and that in turn would obviously compromise their results and obviously again championship position. I suppose though what really helped Toro Rosso was that Red Bull and Honda hit the ground running and actually had a pretty good first year together. In fact, they had a very good first year together. That ultimately meant that they didn't need to throw updates around left, right and centre. Don't get me wrong, when you look at the power unit usage charts, or whatever you want to call them, Toro Rosso do top that quite comfortably. But it's funny, although you could call that a negative, that for me at least just makes their season all the more impressive. The fact that despite all those power unit changes, despite all those penalties, they still ended up with those points and still ended up 6th in the Constructors. And I've got to say as well that at more than a handful of races this year, that car has had some very solid raw pace, and the team have had 3 drivers who, to be fair, were able to extract the most out of it. Daniil Kvyat has had a very good first year back in F1, well in terms of his race pace anyway, I have to say. His qualifying form this year has been somewhat surprisingly very disappointing. But I guess at the end of the day, with the points being handed out on a Sunday, it's his race results that ultimately matter. The thing is though, I really can't help but feel that had he been more consistent on a Saturday, his points tally could and perhaps would have been even higher. And just as I say that, I realise just how obvious a statement that is, but I'm still going to leave it in there. Regardless, I've still been very impressed with him though. I remember when he was announced as a Toro Rosso driver for 2019 last summer, there were a lot of people who were quick to criticise him and that were out there predicting he would have a shocker of a season. But this year he has proven a lot of people wrong. Then again, I've always thought he's a better driver than many give him credit for, so that probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that I'm going to say that. We have absolutely got to talk about that podium in Germany, of course we do. Let's get the boring bit out of the way first. Yes, I know he looked into it with all the madness going on around him, but you can probably guess where I'm going with this. Ultimately, he put himself into the position to capitalise on that luck. And do you know what? Actually thinking about it, can we really call it luck? Certainly not all of it can be, because whilst title contenders, massively experienced drivers and a multiple world champion were sticking it in the wall, Kvyat kept his car on track, stayed out of trouble and drove extremely well in very, very difficult conditions to pick up that 3rd place. I just feel like I'm doing him a bit of a disservice by leaning too much on the word luck. Of course, again, there was a lot of it involved, but you've got to give him credit where it's due. As touched on a little bit earlier, midfield teams get very few opportunities to grab a podium these days, and so it's vital that when those opportunities crop up, they take those chances, and he did. In terms of the teammate battles, because I know some of you really like to hear these, according to Lights Out blog, and these stats are overall by the way, so all the races give or take, Kvyat beat Albon 6-5 in quali, but actually lost 6-2 to Gasly. So despite being a bit disappointing on a Saturday, he did at least beat one of his teammates. When it came to the races, he beat Albon 7-5 and lost 5-4 to Gasly, so he was definitely closer on a Sunday, and that kind of highlights what I was saying about his race form being much better than his qualifying form. But I don't think many can doubt that Daniil Kvyat overall has had a very good 2019. As for Pierre Gasly, I don't think it's unfair to call his season a bit of a rollercoaster ride, and you've got to love a good cliche. Let's be totally honest here. As much as I was really rooting for him and probably cutting him way too much slack at the time, his time at Red Bull was not great. In fact, I was quite disappointed as I did expect him to be much closer to Max Verstappen. No, I didn't think he'd be beating him, of course I didn't. But I did expect a little bit more. Having said all of that though, and as I sit here looking at his season results, he wasn't actually as awful as has been made out. Sure, he was well beaten by his teammate, that's Max Verstappen. Look, I totally get that the first person any driver is measured up against is their teammate, But come on, comparing Pierre to Max is always only going to go one way. But back to my point, no, he wasn't great, but the way the media were talking, it was like he was cruising home in 16th place every race, whereas he was actually picking up some pretty decent and consistent points. He also had very strong drives at Silverstone and pre-mechanical retirement at Baku, so there were glimpses of that speed that got him the Red Bull drive in the first place. The problem was there just wasn't enough of them. And that's it, isn't it? Picking up consistent points is all well and good when you're driving for, well, Toro Rosso, for example. But when driving for Red Bull, they need to see more. And so I totally get why they made the call that they did to change in mid-season for Albon. I was gutted for Gasly, I really was. But he couldn't get to grips with that car, and I do still think the pressure played its part. Frankly, though, when you think back, the writing was really on the wall for Pierre before the season even started. Not long after he was announced as Daniel Ricciardo's replacement, Christian Horner admitted in the press quite publicly that it wasn't an ideal situation and that perhaps Gasly was being promoted a year too early. He then went and stuck it into the wall, I think it was twice in testing, and all of that instantly put him on the back foot by the time the season started. There's no denying, though, his form since returning to Toro Rosso has been seriously impressive, all things considered. Clearly, he is much more comfortable with that car, and with the pressure off to an extent, he's been able to get his head down and pull out some really good results, scoring at 5 of the final 9 races of the year. Now, of course, the standout will be that second place in Brazil, and like Kvyat, there was a lot of luck involved, but whilst others were making mistakes, having issues or being wiped out, he made sure that he was there to take advantage of it and pick up a very emotional podium for him, an emotional podium for Toro Rosso, and yeah, probably Red Bull as well. Certainly Honda too. And I will say as well, although I don't think there's any animosity between him and Albon over what happened, he did have a bit of a mini victory at the end of the season when he just managed to beat Albon to 7th in the Drivers' Championship. And that's despite Alex's impressive run since moving to Red Bull, but more on him in a future video. Look, considering everything he's had to deal with, I think Gasly can be extremely happy and very proud of how he responded to being dropped. He could have quite easily, I think Christian Horner alluded to this, he could have quite easily moped about, but he didn't. As I've already said, he got out there, he got his head down and got on with it, showing everyone that he has still got what it takes to compete in Formula 1. And do you know what? Yeah, perhaps even putting himself back into consideration for the main team in the future. Who knows what's going to happen at the end of 2020 when Max Verstappen's out of contract and Hamilton and all of those? Red Bull might give him another opportunity. All in all, though, a properly good year for Toro Rosso and their drivers. As I said towards the start of the video, I was concerned for them this year. In fact, I predicted they would end up 9th, so I was well wrong. And I was certainly not expecting 2019 to be their best year in the sport, so huge congratulations to them. That is it then for this video, but don't forget that you can let me know your thoughts on Toro Rosso's season down in the comment section. And also, how do you think Kvyat and Gasly got on in 2019? Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can of course follow me over on social media, and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.